Welcome to the Building Materials Sales and Marketing Podcast, presented by Mark Mitchell, a sales and marketing consultant who specializes in helping building materials companies overcome difficult sales problems. Mark is the author of the book Building Materials Channel Marketing and a frequent speaker at industry events.
Hello, this is Mark Mitchell from Wizard Strategy. Thanks for joining me again on this episode of my podcast. Today, I want to talk about finding the right way in building material sales and marketing. I always talk about how I'm a contrarian. So as soon as somebody says this is the right way to do something, then a little alarm goes off and says, okay, there must be another way to do this. Because I find as soon as you are locked into there's a right way, you start to put on some blinders and you start to miss some opportunities and see some, we'll say weaknesses. I've always been amazed at how many building material companies assume there's a right way to grow their business, and they pursue that single way to do it as if there's a rule book or they're following some imaginary laws of what you have to do. And it would be like, oh my gosh, if I didn't do this, it would be like, are you going to get a ticket or you're going to get a fine? It amazes me. So companies that sell commercial building materials, many times, it's locked into their head. The only way to sell commercial building materials is by calling on architects. And the only way to call on architects is to have a lunch and learn. And then what you're trying to do is to get the specification or get in the specification, even though the specification will always say or equal. And there's like this focus that that's the only way to do it. And it's certainly one way to do it. And there are companies who do it quite well. But with 50% of buildings today being built following design build as opposed to traditional architectural specification, that's 50% of the buildings that perhaps calling on the architect is not the best way to do it. I'm also finding that more and more the owners are getting more involved, or your product may have a great benefit to the installing contractor. So if you're stuck there calling on, we have to have lunch and learns, we have to get appointments with architects, and we have to get in the specification along with everybody else, there's no rule book that says you have to do that. But that's how many people are locked into things. And the same thing can happen with companies that sell in residential construction, new construction, who are calling on home builders and thinking, if I don't call on the home builder, I can't make the sale. And what I've been finding lately, or the last couple of years, is the home builder is really quite busy and he relies on his contractors, his installing contractors to do things. So if you go in and call on the home builder and you sell the home builder on your product, the home builder more often than not has to call the contractor in and say, oh, this company presented me with this new product that is in your area of the products you install. And I think it'd be good if you would use this. So the builder now has to take time out of his day to sell the contractor. And more I'm finding where companies that start out by calling on the contractor and walk in with the contractor call on the builder are having a lot more success than ones who simply call on the builder, assuming that the builder is not going to have any trouble convincing their contractor to use this new product. And so once again, there's that rule book of like, if you're going to sell residential new construction, you have to call on the builder. You have to call on the purchasing person at the builder. That's the only way it's going to happen. And that's not true. Once you start to take the blinders off, I'm not a big sports fan, but I'm not a big sports expert, but we think about the old story about the first time somebody had the forward pass, what happened? Okay. Everybody thought, I guess, that, two teams line up and they have big fullbacks that run at each other or that try to get 3 yards, always on the ground. And that's how you win the game. We have the bigger guy you have and the better. The idea of having somebody smaller, faster, more nimble who could throw the ball. Oh, wait a minute. That's not how the game is played. But as soon as somebody started playing it that way, the rest of the teams didn't know how to compete with that. So think about how your approach in commercial or residential building material sales could be different, okay? And I'm also seeing where more and more companies today, there's a mindset also about I have to have field salespeople, so many field salespeople in order to grow my business. If I don't have a field salesperson who meets face to face with the customer, I'm not going to grow. And field salespeople are a very valuable resource, but they aren't the only way to grow. And so we're seeing more and more with tools like marketing automation and really good content marketing and, let's say, in-house selling people, that you can be developing leads and inquiries and nurturing them and then handing them to the field salespeople. So you're making better use of the field salespeople's extremely expensive and valuable time, rather than just quickly sending every inquiry and lead out to them and letting them sort it out. I'm seeing the companies that are nurturing those leads in-house, if you will, before they're sending them out to the salespeople, are having a lot more success than the people that just keep having the salespeople chase everything that comes across their desk. So once again, that's the rule says get inquiries, send them immediately to the sales force, let the salesperson figure out if they're qualified or not. And even if they're not qualified, they should still go call on them. And if they're a good salesman, they'll talk them into the product. That's really old thinking. And it's the old, like that's the way the game is played, but you don't have to play the game that way. So step back and take a look and say, what rules are we following because we think we have to, as opposed to we're trying to grow our business, and what things are we running into here? I'm seeing in commercial building materials, I'm seeing the companies who are focusing more on the owner are starting to really win more sales. And the reason is the owner today is now becoming more and more knowledgeable about the products that go into a building, how a building is designed. And so if the owner says, I want this roof on this building, guess what? That roof is going to be on there. Okay. Maybe 10, 20 years ago, the owner didn't care so much about the roof. Well, he trusted the architect or the contractor. Well, now that owner has a very knowledgeable facilities manager who has a lot of experience with every product, and he knows what works, what doesn't, which companies he's had good experiences with, and which companies he's had poor experiences with. So companies who are taking advantage of that and focusing on the owner are starting to get have some real success. The same thing is like focusing. And so if your product is great for hotels, even though you say, well, we sell windows, every building has windows, so therefore every building is a prospect for us, that is not a very effective way to do things. If your products work particularly well, let's say in hotels, and there's projected to be good construction activity in the hospitality industry, then focus on that industry and tell the story about why your product is great or your company is great for working on hotels. That's something that many companies don't want to focus in because they think they're going to lose something, and they lose more by being too broad in their approach, trying to be all things to all people. So step back from your situation and say, okay, we want to grow our sales. We're running into an obstacle. What's the obstacle? Is there a different way to approach it? And many times, I will see companies say, if I could just get the architect to understand why my product's better, then the sales will happen. And I'll look at them. It's almost like if they can say it louder, if they can scream it, if they can turn it into a movie or something, they're just locked into one way for sure to do it, as opposed to step back and say, okay, we do have a better product. They should use it for this reason, but that reason is not important to them. So maybe I need to change my message. Maybe I need to change who I'm calling on. Is your willingness to step back and say, there is no rule book and I can make my own rules and go forward. That's where you're really going to win. When we look at companies that we always admire, companies in other industries that go, wow, how did Apple do this? How did Tesla do something? How did different companies that are Amazon, just extremely creative? Well, they're not following rules, okay? They're making the rules. So I'd like to see more building material companies step back and make their own rules to move forward. I think you'd have a lot more success if you'd take that approach. If you agree with me, or if you don't, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And if there's any other subjects that you'd like me to cover, please let me know. If you found this of value, I hope you will share it with other people on your team and subscribe to my weekly newsletter. And I'd love to also connect with you on LinkedIn. I post a lot more content on LinkedIn, usually upwards of 6 times a day, different information that I'm sharing on primarily LinkedIn. And it's a great way for me to connect with you and learn more about your company and your problems so I can continue to provide valuable, helpful information to the building materials industry. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to this podcast from Mark Mitchell on building materials, sales, and marketing. We hope he gave you some fresh perspectives on how to grow your sales, and will listen to future episodes.